And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana University basketball news and discussion. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Podcast on the Brink is a joint production of the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. For complete coverage of IU basketball, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com. Hello there, and welcome to this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink. I'm Jerod Morris, your host. I'm joined on this episode by Alex Bozich, as always, and we have our special guest, Mike DeCourcy, back with us to look ahead to the Big Ten tournament. I put him in a very difficult position with the first question, and you can judge how he answers that question. We also take a look at the current scandal kind of engulfing college basketball and Mike's unique angle on it, and also get his thoughts on the Jordan Bohannon story at Iowa. And Mike darn near breaks into tears talking about that. And then after that, Alex and I spend a few minutes talking about Indiana, their chances up in New York, and reflecting on the Big Ten season. All of that on this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink. Buying tickets can be complicated and confusing, but there is a better way to buy with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to every type of live event, because whether you're searching for a last-minute deal, planning a night out with friends, or need to find the perfect gift, SeatGeek helps you find the best seats at the best prices, and it's all fully guaranteed. There is nothing quite like being there in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone right now, and it is by far the easiest way that I have found to shop for tickets, because I can be anywhere, and with just a few taps, I can instantly find seats. And I'm planning on using the SeatGeek app here in just a few weeks. I was actually just texting with a fellow IU fan friend last night, and we're plotting going to see Yogi play for the Mavericks. It's a little hard for me to do that during the IU season, but once the season is over, I plan on getting out there at least once, hopefully a couple times, and I'm definitely going to use the SeatGeek app, because when I've done it in the past, that's how I've gotten my tickets, and it really is easy, really the best way to do it. And the reason for that is because SeatGeek is designed to make your ticket buying experience easier than ever, because they save you time and money by searching multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find you amazing deals. And one way to make that deal even more amazing is to use the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, because when you do that, you get $20 off of your first SeatGeek purchase. So the instructions there are just download the SeatGeek app, enter the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, and you will get $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. And we are joined this week on Podcast on the Brink by Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News and the Big Ten Network. Mike, thank you for joining us, as always.
Good morning, gentlemen. Always a pleasure.
So, Mike, I would now like to show my appreciation for you being so generous with your time by putting you in an impossible position. We all know that the vengeful gods of the Big Ten tournament clearly hate Indiana with the passion of 1,000 Big Ten student sections, and will go to any lengths necessary to crush our hopes, destroy our dreams, and vanquish our chances of ever even sniffing a tournament title. So I would like for you to begin here by offering legitimate hope to our humble and long-suffering listeners by painting your most realistic scenario for why Indiana is, in fact, capable of overcoming 20 years of abject misery in the Big Ten tournament, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, becoming the third team seated 6th or lower to actually win the whole thing. Now, please don't hang up.
I think that this season has shown, and I'm not sure what would have happened if Duran hadn't been injured, but I suspect it would have been somewhat similar. This season has shown that they just aren't quite there, because you had the opportunity to play Duke at home, Purdue at home, Ohio State at home, and played tremendously in all of them relative to the season performance. Played really well and couldn't get any of them at home. And so I think that what it says is that first of all, that Assembly Hall as a fortress is alive and well, and will be a real force for the program as Archie continues to build the culture and have success in that way. I think that you also see that you are in a circumstance where you need more talent to be able to compete at the level that you want, and I think it's quite clear that Arch is moving in that direction. And of course, we all know that there's one guy out there who could really change that quickly, maybe not permanently, but quickly. I think that they can go up there and play really well. And I'm not going. You can call it abject misery, when you go up there or you go over there as the 1 seed is in 2013 and don't succeed.
Yeah,
that's abject misery. But going up to Madison Square Garden and giving a great account of yourself and your season, and whatever that comes. I mean, obviously, in order for that to be the case, you have to reach the quarterfinal. You can't go up there and lose your first round game and then feel like you've had a success. There is there's no success in playing well in that game and not winning. Not sure you can play well in that game and not win, but let's leave that open as an option. But if you do that and then you go out on Friday and play Purdue and don't win, I have to think that you feel really good about the progress that you've made over the course of 4 months.
Yeah. Juwan Morgan is clearly the team's best player. Outside of him, who do you think needs to really, really play well for Indiana to do as good as they possibly can do in the Big Ten tournament this week?
Well, whoever is playing point guard obviously has to play well, whether it's Devontae, who has done some really nice things down the stretch, Josh Newkirk, whoever has the ball. And I think, you need Robert Johnson to contribute from the outside because the number of weapons in that regard is limited. If he's not making shots, it's difficult to find them. And he shot the ball really well lately, especially the Iowa game, obviously. But even after that, shot it reasonably well in the next two. So I think those guys are all key to being successful.
Mike, what are your thoughts on the Big Ten having this tournament a week early and also having it in Madison Square Garden? I know it's been a subject of debate, so I'm just kind of curious where you stand on all of this.
Well, I first of all have been to the Madison Square Garden. Gosh, I wish I'd counted the times, but it's many. I've been there for Big East tournaments back when I was living in Pittsburgh and working for the Pittsburgh Press. I've been there for fights, for track meets. I've been there for NBA games and for numerous college regular season games, whether it was what they used to call the Coaches versus Cancer Classic, those sorts of things, early season, the Jimmy V. So I mean, and I can tell you that in the Champions Classic as well in the last couple of years. And I can tell you that I've never walked into that building and not felt special. And I understand the frustration of those fans for whom it is an inconvenience, that it's a challenge to get to New York. And I get that. It's something that people love to do, be a part of this tournament, and that's something that for a long time was either situated in Indianapolis or Chicago, and pretty much only those two places. And so people could kind of depend upon it. And this year and last, Jim Delaney said, hey, they're part of our league too. I mean, we invited them. They accepted. They are part of our league. We would like to make our league important in those places. I can tell you this. It's funny because, there's obviously are complaints from Big Ten fans. I get it all the time, or have gotten a ton of times over the course of the last 4 or 5 months about this. And certainly the Big Ten has more business being in New York City than the ACC does. But they'll be in Brooklyn a week later, and they will not be in the Garden. And I've not been to Barclays, but I can tell you right now it's not the Garden because it's not the Garden. And so anybody who goes along and gets the chance to be there for this weekend will find it to be a special experience. I can promise that. There is a different feel of the Garden. The history, the layout of the building is different. You hear the buzzer go off. It doesn't sound like any other buzzer in any other arena. The roof, the whole thing. It's just to me, it's a magical experience every time I go. And so I don't know what the what the turnout will be like. This was kind of in some ways both the best year to do this and the worst, because I don't think it impacted negatively the teams very much. I mean, obviously it had impact short term, but it's not like it turned this tournament team into a non-tournament team. I mean, I think the dividing line between those two is pretty clear. So from that standpoint, probably a good year if you're going to compress the schedule. From a bad year standpoint, I mean, if you're a fan of a lot of the programs in this league, pretty much from 7 on down, 8 on down, what's the incentive to make the trip? I mean, obviously there's the incentive if you can go to New York, but you may not think your team is going to last very long. Your season has suggested to you that your team won't last very long. And I mean, a year ago when Michigan had the problem with the plane, they went there thinking they could win it. Before that, without any of that, and there was no one who would have said they have no chance. I mean, with the guys they had, and some of they had a first round pick, they had 2 senior, basically 4-year regulars. So there wouldn't have been anything crazy about them winning it other than the story itself with the plane crash. But the 8th place team winning now would be pretty remarkable given the way the season has gone.
Were you surprised at all? I'm not sure if you saw these comments, but Jim Delaney talked to Teddy Greenstein of the Chicago Tribune and just kind of, in retrospect, said that he wouldn't have done this again in terms of compressing the schedule. Were you surprised at all that he came out and made those comments?
I was, actually, because Jim doesn't make a lot of mistakes, so he doesn't acknowledge them because there aren't very many. I was surprised that was that he would say that. I wasn't surprised that he would say we're not going to do this again. I knew this was a one-time only thing from the very beginning. And I think it was sold to the coaches that way. So the idea that this was only going to be for this 1 year, never, and I don't think they'll do, I also don't think, and maybe I'll be wrong about this, but I also don't think that they'll go to, say, Barclays in Brooklyn so that they can be in New York. Going to New York, to me, it's, if you're going to go that far afield, you do it right. And other than that, I think they should probably go back to their rotation of Chicago and Indy. Those two places, Chicago because it's the heart of the Big Ten. It's where the headquarters are. It's where BTN is. The whole thing, and then Indy because it still remains the best place in America to hold one of these deals. It's the best place to hold any big time sporting event for which the city has the facilities. I mean, it's not the best place to hold the World Series. Don't have a Major League Baseball stadium here. But if you're going to play hoops or football, there's no better place. It's just the downtown, the hotels, the restaurants, the bars, etc. It's the best place to do that. I've said for many years, long before I moved to the Indy area, decades before, that they should have the Final Four here every year. To me, it doesn't make sense to keep moving it around because this is the best place. So I understand why Big Ten fans feel it the same way about the conference tournament.
Mike, you sent out a tweet a few days ago. All right, well, good stuff from Mike so far. I'm about to ask him for his thoughts on the current scandal kind of embroiling college basketball right now. But before we do that, a quick note about HoosierProud.com. I had the great opportunity to meet Connor from HoosierProud.com when I was up in Indianapolis and in Bloomington this past week. Our assembly call crew had our annual meetup. Got a chance to meet Connor at the studios of Kent Sterling in Indianapolis. He was really, really nice to make the drive over there. And we didn't get a chance to talk as much as I wanted to, but it was really nice to meet him. And I continue to be so excited about what he's doing with HoosierProud.com. It's something that he started after school. He's built it up from nothing into a really legitimate and successful T-shirt and apparel company. One of the big changes they've made this year is that they have officially licensed IU gear, so you can go to HoosierProud.com and get basketball-themed shirts and football-themed shirts. They did the really cool deal with AJ Moye to get those shirts up there. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you're not going to find anywhere, but you can find it at HoosierProud.com. And so if you're looking for a gift for an Indiana fan, or even if they're not an IU fan, if you know someone who's proud to be from the state of Indiana, HoosierProud.com probably has something they'll like, because they have a bunch of really cool designs that are inspired by unique elements of the Hoosier state that you can find there. So go to HoosierProud.com, check out all of their designs. There's something for everybody who has even an ounce of pride in being from Indiana. You'll find a huge selection there. And the great thing is you support Indiana-based charities when you order from HoosierProud.com, and you can find out what those charities are at their website. And look, we all like saving money when we shop, right? Well, HoosierProud.com has always been extremely generous with our listeners here, at the Assembly Call, here on Podcast on the Brink. And so since you listen to this show, you can use the promo code BRINK, BRINK. And when you do that at checkout, you will get 15% off of your entire order. So they do have official Inside the Hall t-shirts there, and the code obviously works on those shirts, but it's not just for those shirts. It's not just for one item. It's your entire shopping cart. You get 15% off of it. So go to HoosierProud.com, check out all the designs, see the Indiana-based charities that they support, and then use the promo code BRINK, BRINK, to get 15% off your entire order. And now back to our conversation with Mike DeCourcy, and let's talk a little bit about this big scandal that is enveloping college basketball right now, and Mike's thoughts on it. Mike, you sent out a tweet a few days ago that said, given stuff in my mentions, a lot of people would understand the college hoop scandal better if they read my column. That was very compelling, and so I immediately clicked over to your column. The headline was, NCAA has to know what the game's problems are if it wants to try fixing them. And it's a really insightful column. We can't get into all the points that you make, but we'll link to it in the show notes. But the question I want to ask you about that is, do you think that the problem is the NCAA not actually knowing what the problems are, or maybe willfully wanting to obfuscate what those problems are to have cover for keeping the current system in place?
I don't think they need necessarily to change the current system that much. I mean, it may seem like a dramatic change, but from their standpoint, it's really just a rewrite of a few rules. These things that we have long condemned are no longer outside the boundaries of our rule book, particularly agent representation and the things that entail, that are associated with that, loans or whatever. I just don't think that, if you have had for the last, I remember I was in Pittsburgh when the whole Norby Walters case and all that sort of stuff broke. If you have had that going on for more than 2 decades, almost 3, you've lost. I mean, it's been a 30-year war, and you lost badly. You're getting routed. So it's time to change the rule book so that you can be in the game. And I think there are complications to that, certainly, and they have to be very careful about how they do it and what they allow and what they don't. But we don't know what the committee is working on. Emmert's statement on Friday seemed very much to be a sort of a reiteration of the old hard line, no agents, etc. Some of the things he said on Saturday on the CBS interview suggested that maybe they have an open mind, but I was disappointed that it seemed like he started to say, here's what we're working on with this group, with the Condoleezza Rice group. Here's what we're working on. He said there are 5 areas, and then he stopped himself and he said, I'm not going to get into the areas. Why not? Why not tell us what you're working on? Why is that a bad thing at this point? We should know. With all this going on, we should know if you have an idea of what the problems are. The problems of cheating coaches, to the extent that exists, you're not fixing that. I mean, that's unless you start to pay, and even if you start to pay, let's say, like, how do you pay? Do you pay everybody the same, or do you pay varying degrees? If you pay everybody the same, then coaches will cheat, because that's life. I mean, it would be nice if everybody followed the rules, but if everybody followed the rules, we would not have jails. I mean, it's that simple. There would be no need. And the reality of life is that there are people who break the rules because they like breaking the rules. It's not even necessarily about getting richer or being more successful. They like breaking the rules. That's what they get a rise out of that. So you can't change that part of human nature, but you can bring the rules of college athletics more in line with the reality of your circumstance. You can't do this by taking out one and done, and that doesn't change anything except to make your product worse, your experience worse, and the NBA worse. It doesn't do anything to improve the game or improve your circumstance. I know that the agent thing isn't exactly, it's not the way they want it to go, but they have gotten routed. And as I said, it began somewhere in advance of 30 years ago, and it's continued. The growth of that has continued unabated, and the more lucrative that an NBA contract becomes, and they're now astronomical. I mean, what's James Harden, like $250 million? I mean, the possibility of being affiliated with that player. Do the math. 4% of $250 million. And that's without him making a single commercial. So I just don't think that you can ever solve that. You can ever get to the point where you say, no agents, no, they'll never be in our game. We're going to keep them completely out. It's just not possible. So find a way to make peace with them and move along.
Mike, what is a realistic timeline for fans or people who follow the sport to expect something to actually change? Because I think what I hear from a lot of people is, well, we heard about the Brian Bowen situation back in the fall. Here we are now in February, and we're starting to get all these other leaks of information. It feels like there's probably going to be more things to come out. So I guess it doesn't feel like anything has actually happened to this point, but in your mind, what is a realistic time frame for things to actually start to change, if they're going to at all?
Well, Dr. Emmert has said that this working group wants to complete its practice in advance of, in time to recommend changes that could be adopted in advance of the 2018-19 season. That he's gone on record as saying that, and he reiterated that on Saturday. So they're having to hustle along in terms of enforcement and that sort of thing. That will be well down the road, because I think it's pretty obvious that I don't know if they've ever made a statement that definitively said that they're not touching anything until the FBI is done. But I don't think a lot of those cases will really heat up until the legal cases that are still in the court system. I think there are charges against 9 men. One of the cases I know was dismissed, and trial dates for some of those defendants have not been set, or have been set, but they don't come until 2019. So now they may not all go to trial. None of them go to trial. We don't know what the process will be, but until those things are taken care of, I don't know that you'll see a great number of NCAA cases launched. There's sort of a gray area in regards to the allegation, for instance, that was printed on Friday against Sean Miller by ESPN. There's sort of a gray area there because there are no existing charges against him. So whether or not the NCAA would try to do anything against, initiate any action to investigate whether anything did happen there, I don't know. But they may feel themselves still hindered by the fact that the evidence presented, somewhat presented in that story, was part of the federal case, or supposedly part of the federal case. So they may feel constrained by that, even though there are no Justice Department charges or anything like that involving Sean Miller.
Mike, one last question for you, and some people may wonder why I'm going to ask you about this on an Indiana podcast, since it doesn't necessarily deal with IU, but It's the best story that I've seen in college basketball this year, and it's what Jordan Bohannon did a couple of days ago up in Iowa City. Basic details: he had made a bunch of free throws in a row. I think 33 in a row, and the school
34,
record
34.
Yeah, and the school record that was the school record for free throws, and it was held by Chris Street, who a lot of longtime Indiana fans, Big Ten fans will remember, died tragically back in the early '90s. And Jordan missed the free throw on purpose, so that Chris Street's name would stay atop the record books. And I just thought, for a young man of that age to have that kind of humility and vision of the big picture, and to do that, to keep that memory alive of Chris Street, and kind of give another opportunity to tell that story of what a great player he was, what a great guy he was. I got chills just talking about that right now. I just thought it was an unbelievable story of, kind of what's right about college athletics. So I'd love for you to just comment on that before we close.
It's interesting because it was an affirmation of what is right, and there were many affirmations on Sunday. The senior day at Purdue, and Isaac Haas on the floor weeping. The senior day at Cincinnati with Gary Clark and Kyle, especially Gary because he was a 4-year player, but also Kyle Washington, who spent 3 years at Cincinnati, who were beloved members of that community and that program. There are so many. I had a Twitter exchange with a gentleman this morning who basically argued against the very existence of all this. And I've been doing this for 35 years, and I've seen so many players' lives changed by this circumstance that it really gets under my skin about, when people say it shouldn't be on campus, that it has no business, that if you're there to get good at basketball and not, get a degree, then there's something wrong. Well, I mean, Bill Gates didn't get a degree, and Michael Dell didn't get a degree, and Zuckerberg didn't get a degree. But they all bettered their lives and their station by going to college. And some of these athletes may not get a degree initially, but they'll all better their lives and their station. And I got off track there a little bit because you asked me about what Jordan did, but I think I needed to do that so that I didn't weep while I talked about this.
Yeah.
I feel the same way that you do. I mean, if you love college basketball and you've been around long enough to remember Chris, I mean, he was a magnificent college player. He wasn't the superstar, but if you loved college basketball, it was impossible not to love the way he played. And so when he had his accident and passed away, it was just tragic. And one of the things that was compelling about the decision that Jordan made to miss that free throw was that streak that Chris had ended because of his passing. I mean, that's exactly because he may have made another 100. Who knows? That streak was going when he was had the automobile accident and passed away. So I think that underscores more the need, even more so than, if it had been Chris's record, what did he set when he was a freshman, say, and then 2 years later had his accident. Maybe it wouldn't have been as necessary, say, because, Chris is going to be passed in the scoring list and that sort of thing. But this one, it existed because of his excellence, and it ended because of his death. So keeping that one alive was all the more important. And so Jordan's decision to do that, I think, really had a special ring for a lot of people who love college basketball, who love college athletics, and especially in the center of this, it was a reminder that there are many, many wonderful things about college athletics, and to ignore those is a mistake. And believe me, I talk every day to people who ignore them. And I also encounter thousands of people anytime I walk into Assembly Hall, anytime I walk into Mackey, when I walk into the Garden this week, I will encounter many people who understand it's much more than agents paying off players so that they can represent them in the future.
He's Mike DeCourcy. You can follow him on Twitter at TSN Mike, and of course see his work at the Sporting News and on the Big Ten Network. Mike, have a safe trip to New York for the Big Ten tournament, and thank you as always for your time here on Podcast on the Brink.
Thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate it very much.
Yep. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it. Take care, guys. We'll see you up there.
Take care. All right, see ya.
Bye.
So Alex, can I ask you a couple quick questions here before we cut out and end this episode?
Do you want to, or do you want to just leave it as is on that? You think it's long enough, or what?
I think. Well, I mean, I still have a couple questions for you if you're open to it.
Yep. Let's go.
So you're heading up to New York for the Big Ten tournament. What are you expecting from Indiana this week?
Well, I agree with kind of what Mike said about, just the overall feeling going into this tournament. It's hard to expect Indiana to win the thing or even get to maybe even the weekend. Just the draw that they have. Obviously, they're going to play Rutgers or Minnesota first, which, a game they should win, but not a game that they will definitely win. And then having to play Purdue with, obviously coming off a game on Thursday that could be a hard-fought game, Purdue having significant amount of rest coming in, and just the fact that Purdue is, a top 5 Ken Palm team, has a huge size advantage in the paint. It's going to be an uphill battle for Indiana, but I think this is an opportunity for them to just go up there, play well, play under the bright lights of Madison Square Garden. Should be just a great atmosphere, I think, for basketball. And you kind of go up there, you play your best and see what happens. But it's definitely, I think, going to be one of those years where, if it's, last year it was Michigan won as the 8th seed. It's hard to see a team other than maybe the top 4 or 5 seeds winning this event this year. Just there's a pretty big gap between the top tier teams in the Big Ten this year in the middle of the pack, whereas that might not have been the case in previous years. Yeah.
The all Big Ten teams came out yesterday. Juwan Morgan made second team for both the coaches and the media. Robert Johnson, honorable mention, no Hoosiers made the all defensive team. Do you have any quibbles with where Indiana players stood on those teams?
I had Morgan's second team on my list that I posted on Inside the Hall. Obviously, I don't have a vote, so my opinion matters just as much as anybody else's that has, wants to post their teams. But I had him second team. I think that's fair, just kind of based on on the whole body of work and Indiana's team success. As far as the defensive player of the year, I don't know exactly what people look at for their criteria. I think there's an argument to be made potentially for Robert Johnson or Zach McRoberts. Didn't really understand the inclusion of Anthony Cowan of Maryland because Maryland had a team defense that wasn't very good. I don't necessarily agree with 2 Penn State guys being on the team, but, that was really my only point of contention potentially. But, Robert Johnson, honorable mention, all Big Ten. I don't have a problem with that. And Juwan's second team, I think overall, that was pretty fair. Most of the other awards, I kind of agreed with, Coach of the Year, Chris Holtman is kind of a no-brainer there. Kata Bates, Player of the Year, Jaren Jackson, Freshman of the Year. I think those are all pretty clear-cut choices.
My last question for you here before we close up and kind of start fully looking ahead to the Big Ten tournament. Just your final reflection on Big Ten play. I mean, Indiana finishes 9-9. They end on a bit of a down note with the 2 straight losses to Nebraska and Ohio State. As you look back on what Indiana did in Big Ten play, do you consider it a success? Finishing 9-9, finishing 6th, or do you think it was more of a disappointment?
I don't. That's a tough question. There's a part of me that wants to say both things. I think from the standpoint of the fact that they had the winning couple nice winning streaks there was encouraging, but I also think that we'll look back on a lot of missed opportunities. The Michigan State game, the Purdue game, the Ohio State game at home, the game at Nebraska, the game at Illinois. All of those games just felt like there were opportunities to win a close game, and Indiana didn't win any of them. And that's 5 games that is named off the top of my head. If they win 2 of those, or even 3 of them, I think the thoughts about this season are a whole lot different than what they are now. But I think everyone can agree that Indiana got better as the season moved along. The defense obviously got better. This team just kind of lacked a scoring punch from the perimeter. Obviously, Robert Johnson has played well recently, but they just don't have the wing scoring playmaker that's needed to be an upper echelon Big Ten team. And obviously, the size issue up front has been a thing that's hurt Indiana as well. But all in all, I think it's a season that Indiana can use as a building block, and hopefully they have an even better year next year, because obviously they improved on last year's Big Ten record. And I think the expectation for next year should be continued improvement on this year's 9-9 mark.
Absolutely. Well, hey man, it was great seeing you in Bloomington this past weekend. Always nice.
Oh, absolutely. I was bummed I couldn't stick around, but duty called for my first grade basketball team that I've been coaching here for the last 2 months, which was a lot of fun, and I had to get back to be back early Saturday morning. But yeah, it was great to see you, Ryan, Andy there, and hope that's something next year that I'll be able to hang around and spend more time with you guys, because obviously value the friendships, and I think you guys do a great job. So I thought it was great to see all of you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I don't know, maybe next year we'll try and do a podcast on the Brink meetup too. Should be kind of fun.
Oh, that'd be cool. That'd be cool.
We'll put those plans in place for next year. So good to talk to you, man. Have a safe trip out to New York, and hopefully the Hoosiers make it a long stay. I hope you booked all the way through Sunday.
All right. Looking forward to it.
All right. Talk to you later, Alex. And thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We will talk to you next week, either about a disappointing trip to New York, or maybe a really successful one, and Indiana playing in the NIT. A whole lot up in the air. So who knows what we'll be talking about next week, but we'll definitely have an episode, and we will talk to you then. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. To get more from me and from Alex, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana University basketball. If you liked this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or family member who loves IU basketball as much as you do. You can also support the show by leaving a rating and review on iTunes, which helps us get the word out to more IU fans like yourself. We will be back next week with a new episode. Until then, as always, go Hoosiers.